Good afternoon. On behalf of the Veterans Staff Association, the Office of the Chancellor, and the Police Department at UC San Diego, I would like to welcome all of you to this 9/11 Remembrance event. As each year passes and we get further away from the events of 9/11, it may become easier to disregard the horror that this nation experienced on that fateful day. However, we must never forget that close to 3,000 people perished: mothers, fathers, brothers and sisters, friends, and colleagues. These were ordinary people, people like you and me, living their lives, working, traveling, not realizing that within a few short moments, all of it would be tragically cut short. And yet, in the midst of the chaos and confusion, citizens and first responders came together to organize exits from the towers, to aid those who were injured or lost, and in one last act of ultimate bravery, divert a hijacked airplane from its intended target. To me, these are America's heroes. Therefore, to honor the memory of those we lost, we must make it our daily mission to take action, both large and small, to make this world a better place. This may include stepping in and speaking out when we see something that is wrong or unjust, assisting someone in need, or acknowledging the struggles and pain of another. In these small acts of kindness, we carry on their legacy. I would now like to introduce James Seddon, our 2017 Veteran of the Year, and invite him to say a few words. James.
Thanks, Joanna. It's very meaningful for me to be here today. It means a lot to me that you've taken time out to be here too, especially the police and firefighters who are here, who I see running towards the danger while I'm probably headed in the other direction. But it's important for us to gather and remember that morning. It occurred to me this week that it must be only a tiny percentage of the incoming freshmen who are old enough to remember anything of that morning firsthand. Starting next year, or the one after, it will likely be the case that only a tiny percentage of incoming freshmen will have been alive at all. Joanna's right. We get further and further away in years from that morning. Yet, for many of us, we remember it distinctly, the horror of that morning. For me, I was in my home office that morning, drinking coffee and logging on to check the news. That caused me to turn on a TV, where I saw one of the towers shrouded in smoke. I wondered at what accident could have caused this. Then they showed a replay of the plane hitting the second tower, and my heart sank knowing that it wasn't an accident. I prayed that the plane was empty, that someone had just stolen the plane from a tarmac. I ran to the bedroom where my wife was up, turned on the TV there, and told her the reporters had just said that one of the towers had already collapsed. But that couldn't be. That was impossible. It must be there, hidden in the smoke. Could she see it? We got the TV on and our eyes on it, just in time to watch together, gasping in horror, the second tower collapse. I prayed the building was empty, though my mind knew it couldn't be. As the morning went on, we began to hear inspiring stories of heroism about the first responders and about ordinary citizens. Like Joanna, very inspiring to me personally were the heroes of Flight 93, who saved countless lives on the ground with their actions. Prior to that morning, they were, in every sense of the word, ordinary Americans doing ordinary things. Yet, these ordinary, non-military, non-law enforcement, civilian folks, strangers to each other, collectively figured out what was happening to the country and how what was happening on their flight fit into that. And further, what they were going to do about it. The terrorists had trained together for 2 years and prepared for 2 years for that day. The completely unarmed, untrained, and unprepared Americans decided to act, and within minutes handed the terrorists their first decisive defeat and saved hundreds of lives but at the price of their own. I knew that whatever the events of that day meant for me, my task would be small compared to those on Flight 93. You see, I was a military reservist that dreadful morning, and that day has had a huge impact on my life. By that evening, I got a short email from my commanding officer that simply said, "Commence all administrative actions for mobilization. This is why we're here." By November, I was in the Middle East. Incredibly, 8 years later, I was in Afghanistan, the birthplace of the attacks. I often prayed for some, for any, of what Flight 93's passengers had that morning, for their clarity of purpose, their unity with fellow Americans, and their courage to do the hard thing. I know I came up short, and come up short still. But enough about that morning. What about this morning? What about tomorrow morning? America's enemies didn't expect the national unity that the attacks would provoke. The Flight 93 passengers neither asked nor cared which political party the man or woman next to them belonged, where they were from, who or if they worshipped, or what they thought. Nor did the first responders in D.C. or New York, nor did the workers on the pile at Ground Zero in the weeks that followed. Members of Congress from both parties stood on the Capitol steps, held hands, and sang. Imagine that. Held hands. Where has that feeling gone this morning? When we forget that unity, we do the terrorists' work for them, as we do when we forget the ideals that America strives for, when we forget that what binds us in common is so much stronger and more important than what fights to divide us. So this morning I prayed that our country will regain some of that unity. Sadly, America has enemies. They are not the members of that other political party, whichever it is for you. They are not those Americans who think or look differently than you. Not even the New York Times. So I can honor and remember the heroes of that morning by remembering their sacrifice, remembering what they sacrificed for, remembering their example, and striving to make real tomorrow morning the life they died for. Thank you.
Thank you, James. And now I'd like to invite our first responders to place the wreath at the memorial. like to thank you all for joining us today. Please go forth and think about the words that James shared with us earlier. Thank you.